Nepal is standing at a delicate crossroads. In the past months, the nation has witnessed an eruption of mass protests, led largely by young people, Generation Z, students, activists, who have demanded accountability from leaders long seen as corrupt and disconnected. These protests shook the state to its core, forcing political elites to cede power to an interim administration under Sushila Karki, a former Chief Justice respected for her independence. The dissolution of Parliament and the scheduling of fresh elections for March 2026 created a window of opportunity. But the question remains, how can Nepal stabilize now and prepare for a better tomorrow? The very first priority is calming the streets without silencing the people. Dozens of young protesters have lost their lives in clashes, and trust between citizens and the state is at its lowest in decades. A heavy-handed crackdown cannot bring stability. Only accountability can. That means establishing an independent commission of inquiry to investigate protester deaths and excessive use of force. The commission should be composed of retired judges, civil society representatives, and, if acceptable to all, international observers from neutral organizations. Families of victims must be directly involved, invited to hearings, granted access to findings, and compensated. A government that honors its martyrs demonstrates sincerity, not weakness. Equally important is a public de-escalation pact. Protest leaders and the interim government should sign a joint pledge to pursue non-violence, while the military and police must commit to restraint. This could be announced at a televised round table, symbolizing a break from the cycles of suppression and retaliation. Another urgent measure is humanitarian relief. Hospitals in Kathmandu and other protest hotspots are overwhelmed with the injured, while border disruptions have affected supplies. The government must channel emergency funds to cover medical expenses, expand trauma care. Once the fires of unrest have cooled, the focus must turn to credible reforms that prepare the ground for the March 2026 elections. This is the period where interim governments often stumble, either by overreaching their mandate or by doing too little. Nepal's challenge will be to strike the balance between urgent reform and caretaker neutrality. The cornerstone is inclusive dialogue. A national conference should be convened, bringing together the interim leadership, major parties, youth representatives, civil society organizations, business leaders, and minority groups. The conference's task? To agree on the framework for elections, the minimum reforms required beforehand, and guarantees of neutrality. For youth movements, this is the chance to move from streets to negotiation tables, translating chants into concrete policy asks, stricter campaign finance rules, transparent candidate selection, and fair media access. The interim government must also establish visible checks on its own power. Publishing weekly transparency reports, holding open press briefings, and inviting oversight from respected NGOs will reassure the public that the interim authority is not simply another elite reshuffle. Appointing independent technocrats rather than party loyalists to key ministries, finance, home affairs, education, will further signal neutrality. Perhaps the most delicate task is security sector reform. Units involved in abuses during the protests should be suspended, pending investigation, and clear rules of engagement must be codified to prevent repeat violence. Training programs on human rights and community policing can be introduced with support from international partners. In parallel, the military should retreat from visible roles in urban centers, restoring normal policing where possible. A depoliticized security apparatus is the backbone of a fair election. Equally vital is electoral preparation. Nepal must invite impartial election observers. Even if March 2026 elections succeed, the deeper crisis in Nepal will remain unsolved unless the country tackles its structural weaknesses. The protests were not just about one government or one set of elites. They reflected decades of frustration with systemic corruption, inequality, and exclusion. The first long-term priority is economic opportunity for youth. Nepal has one of the highest rates of labor migration in South Asia, with young people leaving for Gulf states and Malaysia because of limited prospects at home. To reverse this, the government must invest heavily in job creation, vocational training programs linked to industries, microfinance for youth entrepreneurs, and incentives for foreign investors to establish technology and manufacturing hubs in Nepal. A young person who sees hope in Kathmandu or Pokhara is less likely to risk their life in protests or on foreign job sites. The second is institutional reform. Anti-corruption commissions must be given independence and prosecutorial power. Judicial reforms should ensure cases move quickly and without political interference. A parliamentary code of conduct with enforceable sanctions for corruption or absenteeism would strengthen accountability. Third, Nepal needs decentralization. Too much power has been concentrated in Kathmandu. Strengthening provincial and local governments with real budgets and decision-making authority can bring services closer to citizens and reduce feelings of alienation. Local elections, if transparent, will also allow youth and women to enter politics more easily than at the national level. Another long-term pillar is media and digital rights. Instead of trying to suppress social media, Nepal should embrace it by drafting modern digital governance frameworks that protect free expression while combating hate speech and misinformation. Partnerships with tech companies and local civil society groups can build digital literacy and resilience.